The Magic School Bus Chapter Book. The Fishy Field Trip. Introduction. Hi. My name is Tim. I am one of the kids in Ms. Frizzle's class. Maybe you've heard of Ms. Frizzle. Sometimes we just call her the Frizz. She is a terrific teacher as long as you're not afraid of a little adventure. The Frizz is a whiz in science, and she'll do just about anything to teach us about it. When the Frizz takes us on field trips on the Magic School Bus, we see some pretty amazing things. Believe me, it's not called magic for nothing. Once you step on that bus, anything can happen. Ms. Frizzle likes to surprise us, but we can usually tell when she is planning a special lesson. We just look at what she's wearing. The other day, Ms. Frizzle came to school wearing a dress covered with tropical fish. At first I didn't think anything of it, since we'd been studying the ocean all week. I should have known from looking at her dress that we were about to plunge into the adventure of our lives. Chapter 1. Look! There are some new fish in the tank. Phoebe shouted. Everyone gathered around the big fish tank that Miss Frizzle had brought in for Ocean Awareness Day. Wow! Check out the stripes on that angelfish, Ralphie said. I drew one of those for my coral reef report. Everyone crowded around to look at the bright blue and yellow fish. But I couldn't keep my eyes from wandering to the shelf above. There it was, the big, beautiful book on coral reefs that our class had been working on together for days. That picture you painted for the cover is awesome, Tim, Carlos said. Thanks, Carlos, I said. I'd spent 2 days drawing a coral reef, and it had turned out pretty well. I think your shark pictures are great, too. Thanks, he said. This was one art project I could really sink my teeth into, but for a while, I was afraid I'd bitten off more than I could chew. Coral Reefs, by Ralphie. Coral reefs are rocky structures built by tiny animals called corals. The reefs grow only in warm, shallow, tropical waters. Although coral reefs cover just a small fraction of the ocean floor, they are home to about a third of all ocean fish species. I rolled my eyes as Carlos made biting motions, imitating a shark. Is everyone ready, class? Ms. Frizzle said. Tonight is the big night. I swallowed hard. That evening, the whole school was having a big assembly for Ocean Awareness Day. Our class was going to present our special handmade book on coral reefs. We each had to get up and talk about our drawings and reports. I was a little nervous, and not just about talking in front of the whole school and everybody's parents. My Aunt Joanne would be visiting from San Francisco. She's a professional children's book artist and had always encouraged me to draw, too. I really wanted the assembly to go well. Why don't we have one last rehearsal, the Frizz said. She smiled at me. Could you bring us the book, please, Tim? Okay, I said. But as I reached for the book, Liz, our class lizard, jumped up next to it. She swung her tail, trying to balance herself, and knocked the book right off the shelf. No! I shouted. I lunged for the book, but it was too late. With a giant splash, it fell right into the fish tank. In a flash, I reached into the water and pulled it out. All of our hand-painted artwork was totally soaked. Keisha ran to get some paper towels to pat it dry, but it was too late. My cover painting was nothing but a swirling mass of wet paint. We flipped through the book to check the other pictures. They were all destroyed, too. It's ruined! I said. What are we going to do now? Maybe we can still give our reports without the pictures, Dorothy said. Arnold pointed at the dripping book. Not me, he said mournfully. My whole report was in there. Mine, too, I said. I flipped to the pages I had filled with information about coral reef animals. The ink was hopelessly blurred. Don't worry, class, said Ms. Frizzle. A little water won't ruin Ocean Awareness Day. But what about all our pictures and our research? They're gone, Wanda said. How will we give our presentation without that book? We'll make another one, of course. Ms. Frizzle said. I couldn't figure out why she looked so pleased. I had spent all week working on those pictures. I don't think I could do all that research again in one day, I said. Sure you can if we go right to the source, said Ms. Frizzle. Oh. I think I see where this is going, Arnold said. To the bus. Ms. Frizzle exclaimed. Are we going to see a real coral reef? Said Carlos. Cool. Or maybe just an aquarium? Arnold said hopefully. The Frizz winked. I had something a little more splashy in mind, she said. We ran outside and piled into the magic school business. I looked out the window in time to see the bus sprout wings. Buckle up and prepare for takeoff. Ms. Frizzle shouted. With a roar of its new jet engines, the magic school plane soared into the sky. Settle in for a long ride, said the Frizz. I knew I should have stayed home today, Arnold moaned. Chapter 2. Where are we going, anyway? Ralphie asked. About as far as we can go, the Frizz said cheerfully. We're going down under. You mean underwater? I asked. Underwater and down under, Ms. Frizzle said with a smile. We're going somewhere truly great. I knew the Frizz must be hinting at something, but all I could see out the window were the clouds far below us. After a while, the drone of the engines must have made me fall asleep. I woke up with a start to hear Ms. Frizzle shouting, We're here. Huh? Where? Ralphie asked, rubbing his eyes. I looked out the window. We were still way up above the clouds. The Great Barrier Reef. It's right down there, Ms. Frizzle said cheerfully. That's the largest coral reef area in the world. Dorothy said. According to my notes, it's right next to Australia. Wanda laughed. So that's why the Frizz said we were going down under, that's Australia's nickname. Wow. We just went halfway around the world, Keisha said. Cool. I was pretty excited myself, but I couldn't help wondering how we were ever going to get back to school in time for our presentation. Where are we going to land? Carlos asked as the plane started to descend. Jet planes can't land in the water, can they? No, but birds can, said Ms. Frizzle. Grab a feather and hold on to your hats. The next thing we knew, the bus had changed into a giant pelican. We had an incredible view as it glided in circles, going lower and lower. We were below the clouds now, and the water beneath us was a glorious blue. Straight below us we could see hundreds of odd-shaped islands. Welcome to the Great Barrier Reef, the Frizz shouted. Of course, most of it is down underwater, that is. Between the islands were lots of large, light-colored patches. What are those? Keisha asked. That's the reef, the Frizz said. All those lighter areas are huge masses of coral that don't quite reach the water's surface. Wow. I said. This goes on for miles and miles. Reef shapes, by Keisha. There are 3 kinds of coral reefs. Fringing reefs are located close to shore. Barrier reefs are separated from land by deep water. Atoll reefs can grow around sunken islands. According to my research, DA said, the Great Barrier Reef is actually made up of thousands of small reefs. It covers an area nearly as large as the state of California. Wow, Phoebe said, looking out the window. It must have taken forever for all that coral to grow. What do you mean, grow? Carlos asked. You make it sound like coral reefs are alive. Oh, they are, said Ms. Frizzle. Don't forget, all these miles and miles of reefs were made by living animals called corals. Come on, let's get a closer look. The magic school pelican swooped down toward the water. What's happening? Arnold asked nervously. Where is this bird going? We zoomed down closer and closer to the water, then landed with a big splash. I was a little nervous about where the frizz might take us next. But I figured it couldn't be as scary as standing up in front of the school with no report to read. The bus pelican started to change shape. Its feathers disappeared, and soon we were all seated on blue plastic chairs in the magic school boat. Yikes! I think there's a hole in this boat, Arnold said, pointing at the floor. I can see fish down there. Ms. Frizzle laughed. Don't worry, Arnold. The boat has a glass bottom so we can see what's underneath us. We all looked down into the water below. At first I just saw sand. Then suddenly we were over a cluster of coral. Wow, said Carlos. It's even more beautiful than the pictures. Below us was a magical landscape unlike anything I'd ever seen. It looked like a forest of colorful enchanted rocks. Some forked up like antlers. Others looked like big clusters of bubbles. Hey, I know what those are, Ralphie shouted. I did my report on the different types of coral. He started scribbling in his notebook. Do you remember all their names? Phoebe asked. No way, there are more than 700 kinds of corals that help build reefs, Ralphie said. But I do know some of them. See the ones that look like big flowers? Those are called daisy coral. And I suppose those ones that look like big mushrooms are called mushroom corals? Carlos joked. Actually, they are, said Ralphie. A lot of corals are named for how they look like antler coral, finger coral, bubble coral, and grape coral. Ugh! What's that? Phoebe interrupted. It looks like a giant brain. We looked where she was pointing. That's brain coral, Ralphie said. Weird, huh? The brain coral looked like a giant ball covered with wrinkled ridges, just like pictures I'd seen of the human brain. Ralphie started drawing it for his report. None of the corals looked smooth. They were all covered with little bumps and ridges. And swimming among them were swirling masses of fish, all in wild, bright colors. It was like being inside a kaleidoscope. Crazy Corals, by Ralphie. Often you can identify coral by its shape. Here are 3 kinds: staghorn coral, bubble coral, brain coral. The same kind of coral can appear in several different colors. I can't believe how many fish there are down here, I said. Everywhere I looked, there were more fish. There must have been those sands. A school of small orange fish swam past. Suddenly, they all changed direction and whirled away, like leaves blowing in the wind. According to my research, more than 1,500 different kinds of fish live in the Great Barrier Reef, said Da. Wow, look at those colors, said Wanda. Their spots and stripes are even brighter than in the books. I wish I knew what all these fish are called. Those flat, yellow and black striped ones are called butterfly fish, Phoebe said. I did a report on those. And those black ones with white spots are called triggerfish. She started drawing happily. You were right, Ms. Frizzle. I'll be able to do my report again easily down here. I had been so caught up in all the ing stuff I was seeing that I had almost forgotten my reports. But unlike Phoebe and Ralphie, I wasn't recognizing anything at all. I tried to remember what my pictures were about, but it seemed my mind had gone blank when our book fell in the fish tank. The boat passed over the coral patch, and suddenly we were over bare sand, no coral, no fish, no plants, nothing. Where did all the fish go? Ralphie asked. Class, this is a good lesson in how important coral is, said Ms. Frizzle. All the fish and other animals we were seeing depend on the coral reef for protection, shelter, and food. We passed over another patch of coral, and it was crammed with life. Everything was overlapping everything else, with fish, crabs, and other animals all squeezed into the cracks. How does the reef provide all that? Asked Carlos. Small animals come to hide in the coral, and plants grow on top of it, said the Frizz. Fish come to eat the small animals and plants. Their droppings fertilize the reef even more. Before you know it, there's a whole community. But none of it would be here without the coral. So what do the corals eat? Asked Arnold. Good question, said Ms. Frizzle. Corals are animals, but they get food from sunlight, just like plants. How do they do that? Asked Carlos. Let's take a closer look, said the Frizz. She pulled a lever on the bus boat. With a splash, we were underwater, swimming around inside the magic school fish. At first, the other fish scattered when they saw us approach. But we kept shrinking and shrinking until we were small enough that they ignored us. Then we got so small that instead of swimming away, they started looking at us like they thought we were food. I liked our old size better, said Arnold nervously. We never shrank this small at my old school, Phoebe added. A beautiful angelfish swam by my window. It was no bigger than the ones in our tank back at school, but now it seemed as big as an elephant. And it was coming right at us. Help! It's going to attack! Ralphie screamed. Don't worry, said Ms. Frizzle. Coral reefs are full of good places to hide. That's how small fish like us survive. We scooted into a crack between two pieces of coral where the bigger fish couldn't reach us. Hey, this coral sure is lumpy, said Carlos. Sure enough, now that we were close to the coral, we could see that it was covered in tiny bumps. That's right, Carlos. Each of those bumps is called a coral polyp, the Frizz said. Those are the living coral animals. I thought those big rocky things were the coral, I said, as our bus fish wove through a maze of staghorn coral. In a way, those rocky parts are the coral polyp skeletons, said the Frizz. Each polyp makes a little cup of limestone to live in. Thousands of polyps build up thousands of these tiny cups, creating a piece of coral. The polyps all live on the coral skeleton's outer surface. I still don't see why you call it a coral skeleton, Wanda said. Well, it's not like our skeleton, of course. Our skeletons are inside our bodies, and theirs are outside, said the Frizz. The coral skeleton is a hard, bony structure that supports the polyp's soft bodies from underneath. We zoomed in close to look at the bumpy surface of the coral. The orangish polyps were packed so close together that you couldn't even see the limestone skeleton underneath. Wow. Corals are more complicated than I thought, I said. That's not all. Look closely at those polyps, said Ms. Frizzle. What do you see? Our tiny bus fish shrank even more until we were smaller than a polyp. Hey, the polyps are clear, said Carlos. Yeah, all their